It was a typical Sunday afternoon, February 1, 2004. In Sarasota, Florida, 11-year-old Carly Brucia left her friend's house, walking the familiar route home, one she'd taken countless times before. It was broad daylight, the kind of day that felt safe, where danger seemed far removed from the lives of children like Carly. Her family expected her home soon. But this time, she never arrived. In a single moment, captured by a security camera at a local car wash, her ordinary walk turned into a haunting scene, a scene that would replay over and over in the minds of investigators, her family, and the nation. What that camera recorded was chilling. A man, unknown to Carly, emerged from the shadows. He approached her with calmness, with purpose. Carly hesitated, backing away. But in less than a minute, she was led off-screen, and into a nightmare. She was gone, taken by a man in plain sight, on a bustling street, with no witnesses to stop it. What happened next was unimaginable, a race against time, a frantic search that would lead to a devastating discovery. Carly Brucia was not just another name on a missing persons report. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. A girl who loved animals, who laughed easily, who had dreams no different than any other child her age. But on that day, her life changed in a way no one could have imagined. And as night fell, panic began to set in. Her family called the police, desperately hoping she had simply lost track of time or taken a different route home. But deep down, they knew something was terribly wrong. Within hours, local law enforcement launched a search, combing the streets of Sarasota and its surrounding areas. Volunteers joined in, neighbors offered their help, and the media caught wind of the growing concern. But as the minutes turned into hours, and the hours stretched into the long, painful night, the reality began to sink in: Carly wasn't coming home. Somewhere out there, a predator had taken her, and the clock was ticking. For days, the community of Sarasota was gripped by fear, hope, and helplessness. Search parties scoured the town, diving into every lead, every possible sighting. Local media broadcasts featured Carly's photo, pleading with the public to help bring her home. But as the investigation intensified, so did the mystery surrounding her disappearance. Who was the man seen on camera with Carly? How could he have taken her in broad daylight, on a busy street, without anyone stopping him? And where had he gone? The security footage offered clues, but they were few, and frustratingly vague. The man appeared calm, almost methodical, as he led Carly away. He wasn't in a hurry, wasn't panicking. He knew what he was doing. But his identity remained a mystery. Investigators scoured the footage, zooming in on his clothing, his mannerisms, his face, but there were no matches in any criminal database. The man, for now, remained a ghost. Stay with us as we take you deeper into the case that gripped a nation, the search for Carly Brucia, and the terrifying truth behind her abduction. What would follow was a story of heartbreak, loss, and a criminal investigation that would push law enforcement to its limits. Carly Jane Brucia was 11 years old. Born on March 16, 1992, she was a typical kid in many ways, bright, curious, and full of energy. She lived with her mother, Susan, in a quiet neighborhood in Sarasota, Florida. Her parents had separated years earlier, but she remained close with both, especially her mother, who described Carly as outgoing and adventurous. She loved animals, was involved in her school's choir, and was surrounded by a close circle of friends. Carly's disappearance wasn't just a story of a missing child, it was the loss of a little girl with dreams, with a life yet to be fully lived. On that fateful afternoon, Carly had spent time with a friend nearby, something she often did. She left to walk home just after 6 p.m. A route that was so familiar, she could probably walk it with her eyes closed. There was nothing unusual about the day, no signs of trouble, no indication that anything was out of place. The streets were quiet, the sky still bright, and it was supposed to be just another ordinary walk. But what neither Carly, nor anyone else knew, was that danger was much closer than anyone could have imagined. It was around 6:15 p.m. when Carly reached the parking lot of a local car wash, a shortcut on her way home. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then, as she passed through the lot, a man appeared, calm, deliberate, as if he had been waiting for her. The car wash's security camera captured the chilling moment he stepped forward. There were no shouts, no signs of a struggle. He simply took her by the arm, and in just a few short steps, they were gone, vanishing from sight. The footage was only 30 seconds long, but it would become the key piece of evidence in a race against time. That man was Joseph P. Smith, a 37-year-old mechanic with a violent criminal history, including drug-related offenses and accusations of assault. As it turned out, Smith had been prowling the area, looking for an opportunity. And on that day, Carly Brucia became his target. By the time her family realized she was missing, Smith had already taken her somewhere far from the safe streets of Sarasota. As the hours passed, panic set in. Carly's mother, Susan, reported her missing later that evening, when she failed to come home. Local police launched a search immediately, combing through her usual route and calling out to neighbors, hoping someone had seen her. But the only real clue was the surveillance tape from the car wash, a grainy video that quickly became the center of the investigation. Carly's abduction set off a national conversation about child safety and surveillance. But for investigators, the focus was singular: finding Carly before it was too late. Experts weighed in, noting the unusual brazenness of the crime committed in broad daylight, on a busy street. It seemed calculated, methodical, and terrifyingly efficient. Detectives analyzed the footage frame by frame, studying every movement, every detail, hoping for a breakthrough. February 1st, 2004. It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon, like any other. Sarasota was quiet, as families prepared for dinner, children played outside, and the routine of suburban life continued uninterrupted. But for 11-year-old Carly Brucia, this day would mark the end of normalcy. Carly had spent the afternoon with a friend, and, as the evening crept closer, she set off for home. The time was around 6:15 p.m. She walked a route she had taken many times before, a familiar stretch of sidewalk leading past businesses, homes, and the local car wash. Carly was expected home soon after. Her mother, Susan, waited anxiously, thinking she might have gotten distracted. It wasn't unusual for her to take her time or stop by a friend's house, but as the minutes passed, a feeling of unease began to settle in. Carly had been seen by passing cars, even caught on the security camera at the car wash. But no one knew what happened next. No one witnessed the brief, terrifying moment when a man approached her, engaged her in conversation, and then took her by the arm. Authorities would later describe this as the most disturbing aspect of the kidnapping. It happened in broad daylight, on a busy street, with no one stopping to intervene. The abductor appeared composed, as if he knew what he was doing and had done it before. The CCTV footage, while helpful, wasn't enough. Time was running out, and Carly's life hung in the balance. Officers combed through the streets of Sarasota, focusing on the route Carly had taken. Neighbors, friends, and strangers alike gathered to help, handing out flyers and searching wooded areas, abandoned lots, anywhere they thought she might be. But despite the desperate search, Carly was nowhere to be found. The CCTV footage from the car wash was soon released to the public, showing the world the last known moments of Carly's freedom. People were shocked. How could this happen so quickly, so casually, with no one stopping to help? Investigators feared the worst. Time was not on their side, and they knew that if Carly wasn't found soon, the chances of finding her alive would rapidly diminish. Within days, the case became national news. The footage of Carly being led away by her abductor played on repeat on news channels across the country. Investigators worked tirelessly, chasing every lead, interviewing witnesses, and scouring through tips from the public. But for days, nothing concrete came up. The man in the footage seemed to have vanished, just as quickly as he had appeared. Detectives tried to enhance the footage, hoping to get a clearer image of the suspect's face, but it remained grainy and difficult to analyze. The community was on edge, parents kept their children close, terrified that the same man might strike again. Still, Police pressed on, determined to find Carly and bring her abductor to justice. By 7 p.m. on the night of February 1, 2004, Susan Brucia knew something was terribly wrong. Her daughter, Carly, wasn't the type to wander off without telling anyone. After checking in with Carly's friends and retracing her usual route, panic began to set in. Susan made the call to the Sarasota Police Department, officially reporting her daughter as missing. From that moment, the search for Carly Brucia began in earnest. Local officers were dispatched immediately, canvassing the streets and questioning anyone who might have seen the young girl. Neighbors were interviewed, friends called, and door-to-door searches began. Officers looked through backyards, behind fences, and into alleys. They stopped cars passing through, asking if anyone had seen the young girl in the pink shirt and jeans. As the hours passed with no sign of Carly, a sense of dread began to settle over the Brucia family and the community. The Sarasota police worked tirelessly, but every lead they followed seemed to reach a dead end. Within hours, the Sarasota Police Department had mobilized a full-scale search effort, aided by local volunteers and nearby law enforcement agencies. Officers combed through the area around the car wash where Carly was last seen, searching for any clues. Helicopters were dispatched to scan the nearby woods and parks, while divers searched ponds and lakes, hoping against hope that she might still be alive. Meanwhile, detectives began the grueling task of reviewing CCTV footage from nearby businesses and questioning anyone who might have witnessed something suspicious. But the leads were scarce, and days quickly turned into weeks. Days turned into weeks, and the search for Carly Brucia became more desperate with each passing hour. The Sarasota Police Department continued to work around the clock, but they were faced with an overwhelming sense of frustration. Despite exhaustive efforts, combing through miles of dense woods, interviewing hundreds of people, and reviewing hours of surveillance footage, there was still no sign of the young girl. Her family's anguish was palpable. In a series of heart-wrenching press conferences, Susan Brucia stood before cameras, begging for her daughter's safe return. "We love you, Carly," she said, her voice breaking. "Please come home." But as each day passed without new leads, hope began to fade. The case was now a nationwide story, capturing the attention of millions across the country. Media outlets reported on every new development, and people from all over the country sent in tips, hoping to help. But the investigation stalled. The grainy CCTV footage was frustratingly unclear. Investigators couldn't make out the suspect's face, and even after enhancing the footage, the man remained elusive. The community held its breath, hoping for a break in the case, but for weeks, it seemed like that break would never come. As weeks turned into months, the case grew colder. Detectives began to worry that they might never find Carly, or if they did, it would be too late. Her disappearance had become a nightmare for everyone involved, a seemingly unsolvable mystery that haunted the small town of Sarasota. After weeks of frustration, the investigation took a dramatic turn. A tip from a local resident led police to Joseph P. Smith, a 37-year-old mechanic with a long history of criminal behavior. Known for his violent tendencies and drug addiction, Smith was no stranger to law enforcement. When officers arrived at his apartment, they knew they were looking at their prime suspect. As the days turned into weeks, the Sarasota community and investigators were left grasping for answers. With little physical evidence and no immediate suspect, theories about Carly's disappearance began to swirl. The question on everyone's mind was this a random abduction, or had Carly been specifically targeted? One of the most disturbing theories considered by law enforcement was whether Carly had been taken by someone she knew, someone who had been watching her for days, or even weeks. In cases like this, where there is little evidence left behind, the possibility of a premeditated crime seemed all too real. Could the man seen in the grainy CCTV footage have been a neighbor, a family acquaintance, or someone who worked near her route home? At the same time, another theory took hold, that this was a crime of opportunity. Carly had taken her usual route home, alone, and it was possible that her abductor had been driving by and seized the chance to strike. It could have been anyone, a drifter, a predator looking for a victim. Sarasota wasn't known for violent crime, but in 2004, the possibility that someone could simply pluck a child off the street in broad daylight was terrifyingly real. At the time, police were following every possible lead. One name that quickly rose to the top of the suspect list was Joseph P. Smith, a local man with a disturbing history. Smith had been in and out of jail for various offenses, drug possession, theft, and violent behavior. He was known for his erratic personality and had been spotted near the area of Carly's disappearance on more than one occasion. Despite his previous run-ins with the law, Smith had somehow managed to evade serious prison time. But as the pressure mounted on law enforcement to solve the case, his name kept coming up in interviews and witness reports. Could he have been the man seen leading Carly away in the car wash footage? Smith had a chilling record that fit the profile investigators were looking for, a man with a history of criminal behavior, drug addiction, and no clear alibi for the day of Carly's abduction. He was known for his violent tendencies and had a reputation for lurking in the areas where young girls frequented. But despite these factors, police lacked direct evidence tying him to the crime. With Smith in custody, investigators began piecing together a profile of a man who could carry out such a heinous act. Criminal psychologists pointed to Smith's erratic behavior, his drug addiction, and his violent past as indicators of a deeply troubled individual. Abductors like Smith often operate out of a desire for control and power, seizing moments when their victim is most vulnerable. But there was still one nagging question: why Carly? Was she targeted because of her age, her innocence, or simply because she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Investigators were desperate for answers, but so far, they had nothing more than theories to go on. Was Joseph Smith a cold and calculated predator, someone who had been watching Carly for days, waiting for the right moment to strike? Or was this simply a crime of opportunity, where a vulnerable young girl crossed paths with a man whose life was spiraling out of control? As the days ticked by, law enforcement raced to uncover the truth. For months, the investigation seemed to be at a standstill. Despite Smith being in custody, law enforcement had little in the way of concrete evidence to directly link him to Carly Brucia's disappearance. Witness testimonies were conflicting, and without any solid forensic proof, there was the growing fear that Smith might walk free. But then, nearly a year after Carly's abduction, a crucial piece of evidence came to light that would change the course of the investigation forever. Forensic scientists re-examined fibers found on Carly's clothing, matching them to materials in Smith's car. More importantly, advancements in DNA technology allowed investigators to find traces of Carly's DNA in Smith's vehicle, offering the most damning link between the suspect and the victim. The breakthrough provided a sigh of relief for a community that had spent months living in fear and uncertainty. This discovery was the first domino to fall, but it was far from the last. As forensic evidence mounted, Smith's behavior became erratic. In a chilling twist, it was revealed that Smith had confided in a fellow inmate, admitting to his involvement in Carly's death. This jailhouse confession, along with the DNA match, was the break that investigators had been waiting for. The trial of Joseph P. Smith began in 2005, nearly a year after Carly Brucia's disappearance. The prosecution wasted no time in presenting the mountain of evidence against him. DNA samples, fiber analysis, and the jailhouse confession painted a grim picture of a man who had crossed the line from petty crime to unspeakable violence. As Smith sat in the courtroom, his demeanor was cold and detached, even as prosecutors revealed the disturbing details of Carly's final moments. The trial would last for several grueling weeks, but by the end of it, there was no doubt in anyone's mind: Joseph P. Smith was guilty. The evidence was overwhelming, and in the face of such damning proof, Smith had little choice but to admit his role in the crime. But the most heartbreaking revelation was yet to come: how Carly had died, and the terror she must have felt in her final moments. On February 6, 2005, the jury returned with its verdict. Joseph P. Smith was found guilty on all counts related to the abduction, sexual assault, and murder of Carly Brucia. The evidence, both forensic and circumstantial, had painted a vivid and horrifying picture of a man capable of unspeakable cruelty. For Carly's family, the verdict was a bittersweet victory, a sense of justice, yes, but it would never bring their daughter back. Smith was sentenced to death for his crimes, a sentence he would never escape. Yet, for many, the haunting question remains: how could such a tragedy have occurred in the safety of daylight, in a place where children were supposed to feel secure? The trial may have brought answers, but for Carly's family and the Sarasota community, the scars left by her loss would never fully heal. As the world continues to move forward, one thing remains certain: Carly Brusius' memory will never fade, and her story will forever serve as a reminder of the dangers lurking where we least expect them. After months of investigation and a community driven to desperation, Sarasota police made the breakthrough arrest on February 6, 2004. Joseph P. Smith, a local man with a criminal past, was taken into custody. He was no stranger to the law, having a history of drug use, violent behavior, and previous arrests. But nothing in his record could have prepared investigators for the horrors that lay beneath the surface. Joseph Smith's arrest was a pivotal moment in the case, but it was only the beginning of a long and painful legal battle. Charged with kidnapping, sexual battery, and first-degree murder, Smith faced the death penalty. In the months leading up to the trial, his defense team attempted to challenge the evidence against him, but the sheer weight of forensic proof and witness testimony painted a damning picture of the man behind Carly's disappearance. In March 2005, the trial of Joseph P. Smith began. The prosecution meticulously laid out the evidence that tied Smith to Carly's murder. The DNA match, the fibers found in his car, and the grainy CCTV footage were damning. But perhaps most chilling were the details of Smith's confession. In a jailhouse conversation with another inmate, Smith had admitted to abducting and murdering the 11-year-old girl, a confession that would seal his fate in the eyes of the jury. The defense struggled to keep up, offering little more than attempts to cast doubt on the forensic evidence. They questioned the validity of the DNA findings, pointing to potential contamination and procedural errors. But as the days wore on, it became clear that no argument could save Smith from the overwhelming evidence against him. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just a few hours before returning their verdict: guilty on all charges. As the foreman read the verdict aloud, Carly's family erupted in a mix of tears and relief, their emotions finally spilling over after more than a year of unimaginable grief. Joseph P. Smith had been brought to justice. The sentencing was swift. Smith was given the death penalty for his crimes. For Carly's family, the outcome provided some semblance of closure, but no verdict or sentence could ever undo the devastation of losing a daughter in such a horrifying way. Smith's case would go on to wind through the appeals process, but for the Sarasota community, the man who had shattered their sense of safety was finally behind bars. Who was Joseph P. Smith, and what drove him to commit such a heinous act? Born into a life marked by poverty, addiction, and crime, Smith's descent into violence seemed almost inevitable. His criminal record was littered with drug charges, petty thefts, and violent outbursts. Yet, nothing in his past had hinted at the unimaginable cruelty he would later unleash on an innocent child. Psychologists who examined Smith during the trial pointed to a deep-seated need for control and power, traits often found in individuals who commit violent crimes. His history of substance abuse had exacerbated these tendencies, pushing him further into a life of chaos and lawlessness. But while his background may explain his behavior, it does not excuse it. In the end, Smith's life of crime and desperation culminated in an act that would forever change Sarasota. His need for power and control, combined with an overwhelming lack of empathy, had turned him into a predator, one who preyed on the vulnerable in the most chilling way imaginable. The conviction of Joseph P. Smith brought a measure of justice, but for Carly Brusius' family, true closure would always remain out of reach. As the trial ended, and as headlines moved on, they were left with the painful reality that Carly was gone forever. No sentence could bring back the young girl whose bright future had been so violently stolen. For Susan Shorpen, Carly's mother, the loss was all-consuming. She often spoke publicly about how she struggled to cope with the void that her daughter's death had left in her life, haunted by the thought of what might have been. The emotional toll of Carly's death wasn't confined to her family alone. The entire Sarasota community felt the weight of her loss. Parents, once assured that their children were safe walking to and from school, were now gripped by a lingering fear. Schools began tightening security, and many children began traveling with supervision, constant reminders of the day Carly was taken in plain sight. Over time, Carly became a symbol of innocence lost, her memory preserved in the hearts of those who loved her and the wider community that mourned her. While Carly's death left an indelible mark on her family, it also sparked a wave of change throughout Sarasota. Each year, the community gathers to remember Carly, lighting candles and sharing memories of the little girl whose life was cut tragically short. Carly Brucia's family, though forever heartbroken, has found solace in the fact that her death has led to greater awareness and action. Her story has inspired countless families to take measures to protect their children, and her legacy has become one of both caution and compassion. Though she is gone, her memory continues to light the way for others, reminding us all of the need to protect the most vulnerable among us. The tragic case of Carly Brucia was not just a crime against one young girl, it highlighted the vulnerabilities in our society regarding child safety and the challenges that law enforcement faces in preventing and solving such heinous acts. Carly's abduction, which occurred in broad daylight on a busy street, was a jarring reminder that danger can lurk even in the most familiar environments. In the aftermath of this heartbreaking case, experts have weighed in on the broader implications surrounding abductions and public safety. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, stranger abductions are rare, accounting for a small fraction of missing person cases. However, the fear they evoke can have lasting effects on a community. The Brucia case underscored the critical importance of vigilance and proactive measures to safeguard children. Child safety advocates emphasize the necessity of open dialogues about personal safety between parents and children. Educational programs focused on stranger danger and the importance of being aware of one's surroundings became focal points in Sarasota, directly inspired by Carly's story. The ongoing community response also includes increased involvement from local law enforcement, who have since implemented programs focused on building relationships with schools to foster an environment of safety. These efforts include routine safety drills, guest speakers who discuss crime prevention, and outreach initiatives designed to keep lines of communication open between officers and families. Despite the many lessons learned, the case remains a poignant reminder of the vulnerabilities children face. The challenges law enforcement encounters, whether in identifying suspects or protecting communities, continue to evolve. The Brucia case opened avenues for discussions on improving investigative techniques, utilizing technology like surveillance cameras more effectively, and fostering greater public involvement in neighborhood watch programs. As we reflect on Carly Brucia's story, we are reminded of the ongoing need for community vigilance and the importance of education in preventing tragedies like this from happening again. Carly's legacy lives on in the awareness it raised, urging us all to take action in our communities, ensuring that no other family has to endure the heartache experienced by the Brucias. After a tumultuous journey through grief and justice, we are left to ponder the lasting implications of the Carly Brucia case. Do you believe justice was truly served? Was the conviction of Joseph P. Smith enough to bring closure to the Brucia family, or are there still unanswered questions lingering in the shadows? Your voice matters. Join the conversation in the comments below. If you found this story as haunting and compelling as we did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Each click not only supports our work but also helps us shed light on more deep dives into true crime stories, reminding us that while some stories end, others continue to unfold. The segment encourages viewers to engage actively. We want to hear your thoughts. Do you think more could have been done to prevent Carly's abduction? What measures do you believe communities should take to protect children? Share your insights and theories in the comments. Remember, together we can make a difference. Your engagement fuels our mission to uncover the truth and advocate for change. Join us next time as we continue to delve into stories that matter. This has been Kidnapped in Broad Daylight, a true crime story. A tale that not only recounts a tragic event but also serves as a poignant reminder of the vigilance we must maintain for our loved ones. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to our channel and get entertained for more stories.